This episode is brought to you by Pepsi Wild Cherry. Pepsi Wild Cherry is bursting with delicious cherry flavor and a sweet, crisp taste that gives you more to go wild for. Getting wild may look different these days, but whether it's opting for a solo Friday binge watch or a big night out, everyone can indulge in their wild side with Pepsi Wild Cherry. Also available in Zero Sugar. So grab a Pepsi Wild Cherry and get wild.
The Love Affair event is on at Whole Foods Market with deals on delicious desires through February 14th. The floral department's in full bloom, so look for savings on double dozen bunches of roses. In the meat and seafood departments, save on animal welfare certified New York strip steaks and sustainable wild-caught lobster tails to make the night sizzle. Gifts from the wellness and beauty department are always a nice touch. And you have to grab those chocolate-dipped strawberries. Make Whole Foods Market your Valentine's Day destination.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Good evening. This is Slogging It. Now, this is an absolute delight for Simon and I. We are joined tonight by a man that I'm lucky enough to interview for a second time, although he will undoubtedly tell you that only I spoke during the first occurrence. But we welcome David Gower to the podcast, and what a pleasure it is. Thanks so much for joining us.
John, a very good evening to you both. Yeah, at least I get to speak now. That might be it. Yeah, if you're still on good form, that might be it. You know,
dear. Yeah, I've absolutely set myself up for that one.
Yes,
but yeah, it was a great honour the first time, and it'll be a great honour again, I'm sure. First question, David. How does it feel to be a national treasure?
I'll ask someone. Who are national treasures are people like Joanna Lumley, and I'm definitely not her, although I had lunch with her about 6 months ago, because she's married to a fellow who was at school with me, a fellow called Stephen Barlow, who is one of the world's finest opera conductors. And he likes a glass of red wine too. So there's a real national treasure or two. Mark Nicholas, of course, he's an absolute national treasure. You know that?
Yeah.
All his friends are.
Yeah, I once got interviewed by Mark Nicholas. He was actually interviewing Dennis Lilly in the 2005 Ashes. I'm sure you won't remember it. You were working on it. This guy, he did a masterclass during the first lunch interview Dennis Lilly did. And he was horrendously drunk from the night before. Hungover, sorry. But yes, Mark Nicholas, he refused to talk to Mark Nicholas the whole interview. It was possibly the most torturous 40 minutes of my life was being filmed on television.
Well, yeah, because 2005 obviously a fabulous summer. Now, Mark was Channel 4 in those.
Channel 5. So.
Channel 5, was it? Yeah. Sorry, 4 or 5. It's just a number. It's a channel. He was on a channel. And they obviously had a fantastic time covering all that. I mean, Mark is excellent, I have to say, without having to be forced into this at all. He is excellent in that role normally. And whenever any of us have a tricky customer who's, for whatever reason, not feeling particularly like talking. I mean, obviously incapable of talking is taking it to an added extreme. You know, some people just don't really feel like it. And that is one of the trickiest times on live television, where if you're getting monosyllabic answers or grunts, it can take an awful long time. And I remember once, actually that same year, 2005, we were doing it for Sky. We were doing live highlights in the evening. So I was hosting live highlights normally from the studios at Isleworth, so sadly not at the ground, but we had sort of did a 2-hour show without having to worry about Dennis Lilly being drunk at lunchtime. Although I must say I'm very fond of Dennis. He was one of my sort of great, one of the great men to play against, luckily at the start of my career, end of his career. But going back to live broadcasting, I once got sent by Sky in Guyana. We were covering the test match there many, many years ago. And Chris Lewis's grandma, I think it was in the crowd. Remember, Chris Lewis came from that part of the world, from Guyana. And we sent someone down to talk to her. And she couldn't stop talking. Would you like to talk to us in the lunch interval, tea interval, whatever it was? So they sent me across, and it was in the days when Charles Colville used to host the whole program. So they sent me across to the stands, and she wouldn't say a word. Every question was, so whatever it was, with the camera there, and obviously it's my presence that put her off. I'm such a disconcerting presence. It just tied her up completely. But she wouldn't say a word. So it's 10 minutes later, we said, well, thank you very much indeed. It's back to you, Charles. Who then sort of came back with, well, there we are. David Gower at his finest there, getting all the secrets out of Chris Lewis's grandma, whatever it was. So it's these things, you kind of remember them. I mean, all the things that go well and lovely and people speaking to you freely, seems the right way to go. But these are the nightmares of live TV.
With them, I mean, obviously, I've been lucky enough to be at a number of events with you, and you are very much a man of the people. That's one of the things that impresses me about you the most. Like you're never unwilling with your time whatsoever. I think in certain situations you probably give far too much of your time, but you will stand and talk to everybody. Is that something that you were doing in your career as well as now? Or did broadcasting bring that on? Is it more of the charity side that's kind of allowed you to be a bit more free with your time?
It's actually a good question. It's a bit of everything. I suppose the problem with playing days, even though it was a million years ago, and social times have changed and lots of things have changed since then. The problem with playing days is that, especially if you're an England player, I mean, even county players, there are lots of people after you. I mean, just the simple thing at the end of a game as you walk out of Lord's, say, or even Grace Road or anywhere, and people want autographs. I mean, sometimes there is time, in which case you can be nice to people and spend the time. Sometimes you've got things to go to, like theatres. I wasn't going to bring that up. But, sometimes there are pressing things on your mind. And if you've had a bad day, of course, you just want to get away from that. So in sort of with the current state of life, and things like you say, quite rightly mentioned, the taverners and stuff that we can do with them and happily do with them, because there's such a sort of feel-good factor to something like that, then it doesn't feel like a chore just to speak to people. And in fact, it can be, let's face it can be quite good fun. And you meet interesting people. You meet a couple of dull people now and again, but you meet interesting people, different people. And it's, I'm happy to switch that on for, half a day, whatever it takes at the time. And then I can always go home and be quiet. Far too often, it's something I think also which you acquire the skill, because that's what it was. And for instance, here's a very good example, which I've actually used to talk to other people about similar circumstances. In the good old days of touring, Australia, say, or anywhere in the sort of the 1980s, you're 4 months away. Every Australian state you would go to, Victoria, New South Wales, they would have a reception. It'd be the local cricket association, New South Wales Cricket, Victorian Cricket. You might go to Parliament House in Melbourne, that sort of stuff. So the great and the good would be wheeled out. We'd be in our blazers and ties, all dolled up. And you'd have this fear that you've got to be trapped in a room for an hour talking to strange people. And one of the best at doing that was Bob Taylor, whose nickname was in the end Chat, because he would talk to anyone. And Bob just said, look, just senior player at the time when I first toured Australia with him. So just enjoy it. You never know who you're going to meet. It might be fun. And rather than sort of huddling round in a protective circle and sort of trying to keep away, these strange people, if you embrace it and say, actually, you never know who you're going to meet. And that's part of it should be part of the fun, not a matter for fear. And so actually, once you get your head around that, you can walk into a room almost anywhere. I mean, you always feel slightly vulnerable walking into, say, a dinner or a function, or until you sort of find someone, maybe a familiar face or just someone to talk to. But if you look upon it as a chance to just engage, then it is literally much more fun than fearing it, dreading it, and trying your hardest to get out of there as soon as you can. So for instance, I'm not going to call it a job, because it's not a job, it's a pleasure. But, the interactions with things like the taverners, whether it be the cricket matches or the odd dinner or whatever it might be, they are genuinely fun. And you have the added benefit, you're doing something special for a special charity. So that sort of just makes it just that much easier. And I think, given time and this incredible age I've reached, some of these skills have eventually sort of seeped into the psyche. So, it's nice to be able to do it, is the simple story now. It was a fear when you're sort of 21, 22 and you're thrust into unusual and strange situations, then it's a bit of a fear.
I think one of our last interactions talking about walking into a room and not necessarily knowing what you're walking into. Well, I don't think you expected me and my friend to walk into the Pakistan room during the England-New Zealand one-dayer at the Oval when I was obviously a little worse for wear by that point in the day. And just, marched into the room. The fellow who was managing the room was trying to chase me. And luckily, you and Gat came to my rescue and admitted to knowing this drunken reprobate.
Yeah. But can I say that you were one of the least drunk people in that room by that stage of the day? Who was in that room? Gladstone, yes. Me, obviously, two Lords Taverners.
Swanee.
Frank Swan. Jeff Thompson. Oh, and actually, no, Tomo wasn't there. It was the one day, right? But during the Ashes Test match, we had Tomo there. And again, Tomo, a bit like Dennis, can train on quite enthusiastically. It's extra. Actually, I did genuinely find it fascinating because it was a room of, say, capacity of, say, 90, 100 people, most of whom, or a lot of whom, had actually come to watch the cricket as well as be entertained and educated and have a bit of lunch. And, but there is copious alcohol available. And a lot of, by the time it came to, say, the end of play, the close of play on most of those days, it's not easy getting a lot of sense out of Swanee. Tomo, there was one day we had a group of rugby players, bless them, very, proper, professional, current, famous, enthusiastic sportsmen. And they trained on rather rapidly as well. So, and Swan and Tomo got stuck in with them. So by the close of play, there was only one of us left who could actually speak English. And I'm thinking, these people have probably paid quite a lot of money for words of wisdom at the end of another great day of Test cricket. So one of us had to try hard. But no, it's a sociable time. John, as we know, it's a sociable time, isn't it?
Of course.
You might as well have a nice day when you go to the cricket.
Absolutely.
Indeed. I was just going to say that sort of being forced to go into that situation where you embraced it and talked to people. Do you think that helped you moving into your sort of broadcasting career? You also widely known as one of the best hosts of these events. Do you think that's helped you with that? The fact that you know what the other people are experiencing, you also know what some of your guests are experiencing, expecting to be their entertainment.
I think, in a sense, all these things are linked in some way, aren't they? Because once you, as it were, learn how to engage with people. I was terminally shy as a kid. The only thing that made me less than shy was sport, to be honest. So once you learn how to engage with people, and once you have a sort of, what helps, of course, is the status that you get from sport, be it at school or, as you move into professional sport. Obviously, as you acquire a bit of status, you become sort of more confident in yourself. And the ideal, or the structure of a conversation, of course, becomes all important, be it man-to-man or on live TV. And the nice thing, of course, about the years I spent at BBC first and then 20 years at Sky, all those lovely people you work with, both in front of the camera and especially behind it. Well, I say, and actually, no, that's the wrong way around. But all very special in front and behind the camera. Those massive teams you work with, but it's a sort of familiarity you build up. So when you're in a studio with Michael Atherton, Ian Botham, Nasser Hussain, David Lloyd, all those people, Michael Holding, all those lovely, lovely people, it is just having a bit of a normal conversation until you wind Ian up saying, talk about a hole in the pitch at Headingley. And then you can sort of needle them slightly for a bit of fun. But it's the same thing. You are just trying to get your way through a conversation. You're still trying to speak English, still trying to make all the relevant points, sometimes in a very short space of time. Sometimes, when it rains, you've got 20, 30 minutes to have a nice long chat about life and cricket and the rest of it. And those were actually quite engaging conversations. So it is the same thing in many, many ways. And I think once you've got over the, as it were, the fear that there might be someone actually watching you at home, and once you've got the hang of the inevitable misspeaks, the inevitable cock-ups that will always come at some stage, and once you worked out that the best way to deal with them is just smile inanely and just savor the moment. There are, over the years, we've all said things or misspoken or mispronounced or even sworn on air, which of course they don't normally go for.
Normally.
Sometimes it's fine. It depends who says it. But I remember when I was first at the BBC, there were sort of people like Tony Lewis, a very urbane host, very good host of BBC coverage when I first started working for them. And he had, of course, the great man himself, Richie Benner, but Tony, for instance, as the host every now and again. And it was very, the technicalities were very different in those days. So communications sometimes with those in the truck. And if things are going pear-shaped downstairs, which, of course, the viewer at home can never see, Tony or whoever it's, whether it's Tony or me or Richie, there's always someone in your ear going, hang on a second, this is going horribly wrong. And that's when that sort of beatific smile comes in handy. And if you can sort of just smile your way through it and keep calm and things will be all right, then no one knows at home. But when you actually get the genuine cock up on screen, either you go or you smile your way through it. I mean, we had the best one I remember having was we were at Durham one year at Chester Street, I think for an ODI, and the great man, Baron Botham, Beefy was doing the pitch report. And it would have been a pre-recorded thing, quick look at the pitch, blah, blah, blah. So Ian sort of shuffles out there. Let's have a look at the pitch then. Yes, a bit green here and a bit brown. Sod it, got that wrong. Now, that was recorded, obviously. And the words could have been maybe sort of marginally worse than that. And so we go again. So, it's recorded, blah, blah, blah. So on the live part of the programme, the build-up to this ODI at Chester Street, I go, right, okay, let's have a quick look at the pitch now. Ian Botham is down to do that. And it cuts to the wrong VT. So we get to the stage where he goes, sorry, let's do that again then. Now, obviously, there's only one thing to do. You go, shoom, you bring the axe down very, very quickly on it. And you cut back to me in the studio when I sort of look up from the monitor to the camera going, trust me, I think it's a very good pitch out there. Anyway, let's move on. And I was very lucky because the other way around, Jesus Christ, what happened there? And, of course, that makes it even worse. So, that was a sort of a nice, smooth transition from a gentle cock up to let's just get on with this and pretend everything's normal again. But we've all said things on air that we'd rather we hadn't.
I mean, as a broadcaster, I mean, I grew up watching you, and been very, very fortunate to meet you and engage with you on a number of occasions now. When you left Sky. It's obviously great that now you're beginning to do more TV work and whatever. Like, how did that affect you? Because from an outsider's perspective, it seemed to be quite a sudden, sharp disappearing act, if you like. Or you were there 1 minute as the lead and whatever, and then all of a sudden you weren't. And I don't think the viewing public, love you as everybody does, could quite understand why that had happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. As we know, sort of trends have rather changed rather rapidly in the last decade even. The way television is presented, the way sort of commentary teams are put together. And it's not just cricket, and it's not just England, it's global, it's Australia, it's the States, it's all around the world. It's football, it's cricket, it's rugby, golf, everything's changing. And to be fair, I mean, I was warned a good couple of years beforehand that they wouldn't be, quote, renewing the contract. I thought, well, really? And I did everything I could to try and persuade them in the meantime over that couple of years. Well, surely there must be something I can still do. I mean, so, with the many, many things that, for instance, Sky do on their cricket, there's test matches, there's ODIs, there's the 100 that came in, of course. There's all the other stuff that goes on. So there must be, just give me, just let me do half a dozen test matches or something. We'll all be friends. But it wasn't to be. So eventually you get your head around it. I mean, I was genuinely tearful, actually. At the end of the Oval Test Match 2019, the Ashes series, we had Beefy, who was also on his way out, who sort of decided he was going to be a winemaker anyway. Beefy wearing his fishing shirt and a pair of shorts and on the gin and tonics at 2:30. I was in a suit and tie trying to make a point that I was, still open for business and trying to set a good example and wanted to go out with sort of in the right fashion. So, I had sort of a few poignant words for the end of it saying, it's been an honour, it's been fun, it's been an absolute privilege. Thank you to everyone involved. There's Beefy going, come on, let's just get out of here. Come on, let's just go. Come on, got a party, we've got dinner to go to. Just give me my moment. And I remember sort of sitting there actually for about 10, 15 minutes in that studio at the Oval thinking, well, it's the last time I'll do this. And then in my hotel room for another 20 minutes thinking, I wish this wasn't happening, But then you end up going to dinner with, Sky put on a lovely dinner. Beefy chose the restaurant. It's Cambio in Brompton Cross, which is the most brilliant Spanish restaurant. And so Beefy was in charge of the wine list. And so we sort of basically carried him out horizontal about 1 o'clock in the morning, went yet again, put him in a cab. We could have sent him anywhere. We could have sent him to Edinburgh, and he wouldn't have known. And in the end, you have that, it's all done very nicely. But I still miss that role. I mean, I still would love to be doing that. But, it's just one of those things. Obviously, I've had plenty of time to come to terms. I mean, the worst thing in a sense was that having got to that stage, the next thing that happens pretty much is, if you imagine this, so 2020, COVID strikes. So for someone like me without a contract now, and you've got, things like, say, Lord's Taverners, we managed to get a Lord's Taverners trip into Cape Town to play table cricket on Table Mountain. Absolute genius.
Oh, amazing.
Absolute genius. We managed to get up on the Cape. I had to sort of clear it out for him, but, especially cable car for one. We managed to get cats on the mountain, and we had this. You had the table, the Lord's Taverners table cricket set up there. It's all playing around. It's an absolute genius idea, and obviously a lovely place to go to. And as soon as we got back from that, which was sort of March 2020, it was COVID, and so nothing happened. The worst part of that was 2 years where you couldn't go and speak at dinners, you couldn't do Taverners events, you couldn't. There was the only people broadcasting were Sky behind closed doors, BBC behind closed doors, also holed up in bubbles in hotels, the Aegeus Bowl. So it was more the fact there was sort of nothing to fill the gap at that stage. So yes, it has been nice. I mean, I've done, I spent time in Pakistan with Transmedia and Pakistan TV. I've done stuff for Whisper, who have been great to work for, Caribbean, New Zealand, in effect for BT Sports, now rebranded, of course, as TNT. So I still enjoy doing it. I mean, that's the nice thing. So I love doing it still, and I love being part of that world. When the chances come up, they're just coming up a bit sort of. There are fewer chances and further between. But if the chance comes up, I'm game for it. Don't have to present. You can just be a nice man on TV saying silly things and shedding a little bit of wisdom now and again. So it is fun. It's still fun. It's still very much sort of part of my being.
Do you think it was, obviously you went straight from playing into broadcasting, decades as a broadcaster, and like you say, the COVID thing, always that team environment. When we've had people that have gone from playing into broadcasting, they say on before they've sort of gone, well, I'll go from one team to another. So did you feel the same with that? You went from cricket changing room to commentary room, and then obviously 2019 happens plus COVID. Did that sort of exasperate the situation more as well?
Yeah, I mean, what I'd done was, there was a certain amount of planning involved and a lot of help. But I'd done bits and pieces of the BBC before I retired from playing fully. I'd had a couple of summers down with Channel 9 in Australia. Did the World Cup in '92. Did most of the series between West Indies and Australia in '92, '93. So again, working with some really good people. Benno, outstanding. Benno, the most brilliant broadcaster that we will probably ever see in our lifetimes in many, many ways. You're working with people like Ian Chappell, but don't tell you both of them. I enjoy Tipelli. He's one of these people that challenges you wittingly or unwittingly with almost everything he says. So it's a good discipline. People like Greg Chappell, his brother, Tony Gregg, the great man Tony Gregg himself, the late Tony Gregg, sadly missed, sorely missed. So that was all good fun, good education, really good education. That whole world is a very easy transfer in many, many ways. The only thing is that some people find that they don't necessarily have the instinctive skill to put things into words in the right way. But there's a lot of cricketers who, for some reason, seem to be naturally very gifted in that fashion. So some have tried and failed, and some have come and gone for all sorts of different reasons. Many have stayed, and of course, I was the sort of beneficiary of that trend at the time, which is, if you can imagine, say, where are we now? Sort of late 80s, early 90s. There are a lot of very good broadcasters around who hadn't captained England or hadn't played Test match cricket for England. And if you looked at the radio, Christopher Martin Jenkins, Brian Johnston, Trevor Bailey obviously had played for England, and the various people involved weren't necessarily ex-England players, but the trend had already started that if you captained England, as I had nicely, then or badly or both or somewhere in between. It gave you a way in. And if you then put sentences in the right order and said the right things at the right time, and were nice to Mr. Benno, then your career was already on the right track. So there is that skill you have to learn, which I would be quite sort of not harsh, it's sort of quite strict on. That the right words at the right time, as Richie set the example, I think are a crucial part of good broadcasting. You can get away with instinctive stuff up to a point, but I think so the words you remember. I mean, Richie, for instance, that sort of great Test match at 81 at Headingley, which I was part of, a small part of, when my great friend Syrian, the Baron, Beefy, made his mark and sort of started that magnificent reputation of his. The shot that went into the confectionery stand and out again. Everyone remembers that line of Richie, because it was perfect. It was perfectly timed, perfectly delivered, just a few words in the right order at the right time. And for me, that is the great art of commentary. And let's face it, as with cricket itself, there are the superstars, there are the absolute geniuses, there are those the level below, and there are those levels below that as well. And that's what we have.
The Love Affair event is on at Whole Foods Market with deals on delicious desires through February 14th. The floral department's in full bloom, so look for savings on double dozen bunches of roses. In the meat and seafood departments, save on animal welfare certified New York strip steaks and sustainable wild-caught lobster tails to make the night sizzle. Gifts from the wellness and beauty department are always a nice touch. And you have to grab those chocolate-dipped strawberries. Make Whole Foods Market your Valentine's Day destination.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Discover new opportunities together in a new Chevy. Meet up in an Equinox, winner of the J.D. Power Award for initial quality among compact SUVs. Lend a hand in the strong and capable Silverado, or mix it up in a high-tech Trax with an available 11-inch diagonal touchscreen. Find family, friends, and fun in the Chevy that's right for you. Click to learn more. Chevrolet, together let's drive. For J.D. Power 2023 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Having captained England and scored thousands of runs for England so successfully, and then been an avid watcher and broadcaster on the game since, how does this England side measure up? And I'm not talking about Bazball, but how excited are you by this current group and what their potential is in terms of achievements?
I love it. You'd be a fool not to love it. The last couple of years have, I suppose, ripped up the rule book in so many different ways. There are so many revelations. It is all fabulous, absolutely fabulous. For instance, having met Ben Stokes at the start of his career, where he was a more taciturn, just a natural player, obviously a very talented player, but one of those little dinners that Andrew Strauss actually put together, getting people like me from a previous generation into the same room as Alistair Cook and Ben and sort of the England team of that era. It's a few years ago now. Ben was a very different sort of individual. And on that experience alone, you thought, well, how on earth is he ever going to be? He'd never captain England. He's just a great player, talented player, but never captain England. And yet, I think the interpretation, which is quite widespread, is this, that all the things he's been through, apart from being, starting with the premise that he's just a brilliant player, but all the things he's been through, tough times the last few years before taking on the captaincy, have given him a sort of worldly experience and empathy. And I think the empathy is the thing that comes through most strongly, dealing with young players. Every series, someone comes in or someone needs an arm around their shoulder. In the good old days, a couple of games, they'd have been out. It didn't work, sorry, let's try someone else. Under this current regime, I won't say it's impossible to be dropped, but there's that greater understanding of the human element, which I've always tried to remember, but I always knew it as a player. Obviously, you're acutely aware of the human element of the game as a player. And then as a commentator, you've got to watch, knowing that these are human beings who are potentially fallible. So each and every mistake isn't, the worst thing has ever happened since the birth of Christ. It's or the death of Christ. It's actually what happens in a game of cricket. And I think some sort of understanding of the psychology of people is vital to creating this environment. And between Stokes and McCullum, McCullum is brilliant because, again, he's not trying to coach the forward defence. Obviously, we haven't seen one for 2 years. He just wants, and if you see him when I've been around the games, and you see their net session the day before a test match. Brendan's not going around shouting at people. He's kind of reading us the latest bloodstock news from New Zealand, where he's got his horses. It's always practicing his golf swing. It's a great atmosphere, which it works, doesn't it? It really does work. And miracles, it seems, do happen. And it's each time we get another miracle, as with test match number 1 in India, where things are basically everyone's going, it's going to go horribly wrong. It can't work there. Now, an Indian spinners, blah, 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 turning pitches, you can't just belt it out of the park. Suddenly, Ollie Pope gets 196, plays fantastically well. And a fellow that most of the cricketing world's never even heard of, who's 6'4", apparently comes from Lancashire or plays for Lancashire now and again, a couple of times here and there, picks up 7 wickets. It's fairy tale stuff, which is just great to behold. It's doing a fantastic job, obviously, of giving Test cricket the right sort of oxygen at a time where Test cricket is under immense pressure. And for people like, us, certainly people like me, being either there to watch it or watching it from a distance, it is heartwarming. It's just brilliant. And of course, yes, there will be moments where this phenomenon doesn't quite work. There'll be, that series against South Africa a couple of years ago, they had a blip. They lost the Test match, came straight back and started blitzing it all around the place again. So, there will be times where it doesn't work, but let's face it, if you try and play according to Don Bradman's Art of Cricket, published 1930-something, there will be times where it doesn't work. If you play according to the manual, the MCC coaching manual, all those lovely black and white photographs from way back, there'll be times that doesn't work. Things have changed, DRS, there's so many things have come into the game in the last 10, 15, 20 years. Techniques change, attitudes change. It's an ever-changing world. And again, going back to Benno, Richie was brilliant at embracing the new. There's a man who goes back to cricket in the 50s and 60s and was a clear thinker about, great captain, great player, a very clear thinker about everything to do with the game. And he maintained at all times an open mind as to what came next. So when ODIs came in, interesting. T20 coming, all these things that just come in almost naturally, and you can't stop it. If you keep an open mind, you can enjoy them all. But obviously the crunch for people like me is the greatest pressure that is being applied to Test match cricket. When you hear people talking, and these are people very influential in the game globally, from India, about IPL, and when we used to be talking about a window for IPL, that window gets bigger and bigger. Then we talk about windows for T20 leagues, and they get more fulsome, and there are more of those as well. Then someone starts saying, maybe we should think about a window for Test match cricket. And of course, it's shock horror. What? This is the finest form of the game. You're going to give us a window for it. Well, that is maybe a commercial reality. That may be a sort of reality of the modern world of sport and cricket. And in many ways, it's better to have a window than no window. But at the same time, I think I'm certainly one who will keep fighting for more than just a window of Test cricket. And so every time we have a sort of game of the ilk of that game in Hyderabad, or in some of the Ashes Test matches last summer, or the West Indies beating Australia in Brisbane, another fantastic story, Jamal Joseph, a security guard. This is how West Indies cricket used to work. Security guards, waiters, they would come off the beach or wherever they had to work, have a game of cricket, suddenly get picked for Barbados or wherever, and suddenly they're playing for West Indies under Clive Lloyd and Viv Richards, and they are superstars. And that's part of the match. That's part of the fairy tale of Test cricket as well.
Do you think, obviously, you've got a lot of the senior players saying the right things about Test cricket. You've got Ben Stokes, obviously, saying what he's doing and trying to play it the way he's doing. Virat Kohli said a lot that it's his favourite form of the game. Again, some of the Aussies, Steve Smith, I like that, saying, no, we've got to keep this going. Do you think that will still hold water, or do you think money will eventually talk, and it'll be a little bit like Rory McIlroy and Live Golf, when yeah, we'll try and deny it for as long as we can, but eventually it will just become too good to be true.
Probably, sadly, probably, because you can't deny commercial forces. And let's face it, there is a lot of money in franchise cricket, most of it in India, of course, but the other franchises that have sprung up since all over the cricketing world are, they are commercial. I mean, one of the things I like, going back to Shamar Joseph, is that one of his quotes at the end of that extraordinary Test match in Brisbane was that, he gave the impression very strongly he wants to be part of the West Indies Test team. We all know, as observers, whether you go to the Caribbean or not, that the temptations will make that a very hard thing for him to sustain. Because if for instance, the offers, people will offer him hard cash, good money to be part of the white ball world, for sure. If he sticks to his guns, brilliant. I mean, West Indies will be very proud of him, very grateful. But we know that West Indies, for instance, are one of the countries, one of the regions where Test cricket doesn't pay. So when we were there in December with the ODIs, the T20s, Johnny Grave, as the chief exec of Cricket West Indies, is saying, the year before they had the 3 Test matches, 5-day Test matches, basically trying to break even. With a 1-day game, they probably make $1 million.
Wow.
That's suddenly you're actually in profit, as opposed to scrabbling just to sort of see if you can break even. And South Africa, we know South Africa. The only thing that is commercially viable in South Africa in the cricket world is the SAT20. Hence, that carries on with all their best players. Du Plessis, Rabada. You can go through the South African Test team, the first 11, each playing in the SAT20. And who's in New Zealand? Not a clue. It's a sort of sad but commercial reality for South African cricket that they have to do it that way, and they are apologetic, but also adamant that's the only way they can do it. So these things aren't just going to go away because we say, we'd like to see more Test cricket. And as you say, people like Virat saying it's still the most important game for him. Well, that's brilliant, because if you've got 1.5 billion subscribers to your X account or your YouTube account or whatever it might be, and you're saying things like that, that is helping to promote what we still say is the best form of the game. But Virat's in a very good position in so many very different ways, that he's brilliant at Test cricket, brilliant at 50-over cricket, brilliant at 20-over cricket. He's a character. He's an icon. He could promote anything. And the fact that he has chosen to say nice things about Test cricket or good things about Test cricket is very important. But it doesn't alter the fact that if an IPL game is on in Calcutta or Mumbai, wherever it might be, the ground is full. And if a Test match is on in those same grounds, it might be half full or 2/3 full. But it's still, if it's Kolkata, it's still probably 60,000 people if it's 2/3 full, which ain't a bad crowd. If it's the Wankhede in Mumbai, it's still 30,000, 40,000 people, which ain't a bad crowd, but it's not full. So I mean, again, that's just the way things work. I remember talking to Kumar Sangakkara about the balance for the BBC for. Ironically, again, coming back to that man, Mr. Botham, Beefy, was the guest editor on Radio 4 on Boxing Day a couple of years ago now. And I was his flunky, traipsing around interviewing people about the balance between red and white ball cricket. I remember talking to Kumar, of course, who would say, yes, he's proudest of all those, 12,000 odd test runs, and all those hundreds and, the magnificent performances that he put in for Sri Lanka in Test match cricket. But he's now working for franchise cricket. And he says, well, you've got to give the people what they want. If they want franchise cricket, then you give it to them and you make what you can of it. So, that's a very pragmatic, modern view of it. So, in fact, that's the point being, of course, it doesn't matter how many people say, well, actually, we treasure our Test match records and our Test match figures. If they are then, it's not siding with the devil, but if they're throwing their hat in with commercial franchise cricket and people are watching commercial franchise cricket, well, there's an immovable force there.
We're mindful of how much time we've got you for, so we've just got a couple of quick questions left. With regard to, and we talk about franchise, and obviously the franchise is popping up all over the world, how I can be quite critical of the BCCI, well, all the time, quite frankly. But, it now seems that obviously the SA20 is owned completely by these Indian franchises, as is, I think, the CPL franchises. Are we in complete danger of India taking over the cricketing world and it becoming too much of a force to ever become balanced again?
Well, I suppose the honest answer is you've got to look at I don't know what the current figures are, but if you totted up, as it were, the net worth of cricket in India, it's billions.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's billions of dollars, billions of pounds, and yet more billions of rupees. It's many lakh, many crore. It's a phenomenal amount of money. Just look at the broadcast rights alone for IPL, which is probably something like $6 billion over 5 years. There is an awful lot of money centered on a very big, it's a brilliant market, isn't it, India? It's a brilliant market. And the enthusiasm, ever since, when I first went there, which is 1980, and played a test match in what was then Bombay, now Mumbai, at the new Wankhede Stadium. It was a brilliant atmosphere, free barrel to a fantastic thing to experience. And if even now, I might sort of not get away with it, but you walk around Mumbai, Delhi, wherever it might be, cricket fans will get you because there is this enormous love for the game in that part of the world. And the same thing spreads across Asia, into Pakistan, into Bangladesh, down into Sri Lanka, enormous enthusiasm. But they have the money. So, that gives them the whip hand. So the old days of, for instance, Australia and England being sort of the two dominant boards and controlling whatever it used to be called, the ICC, they kept the same initials, they keep changing the words. But the power used to be with, in Melbourne and London. That's been superseded by this new commercial reality. So, and what are we going to do? we don't have, no one else has those same resources, for instance, to buy franchise teams around the world. And these are, it's not although IPL is controlled by BCI, but it's owned in effect by all sorts of different people, big companies, big individuals, Bollywood, you name it. It's in there. So what are you going to do? ICC don't have the power to do anything. They're very good at selling the rights to ICC World competitions, T20 World Cups, 50 over World. Very good at doing that. They're very bad at spreading it to where it's needed. There's still a huge imbalance as to where the money ends up. Yeah. And that needs to change because, again, going back to sort of the broader sort of LinkedIn topics, these many strands that all bring us back to the same place. If you want to keep Test cricket in the West Indies and South Africa, somehow you've got to divert some money that makes it viable. It's all very well India saying, well, we're generating most of the money. Okay, congratulations. Yes, they have, they've got the perfect environment to do that. And they do it exceptionally well. But, for the greater good, the ICC it so often seems powerless. It just seems like, we can arrange a meeting, but we can tell you the answer now before we've had the meeting.
Yeah.
That's what I find frustrating. And of course, all the great and the good will meet now and again, at ICC meetings, discuss what they think is good. And yet, there are a lot of people like us frustrated by the way it all ends up. And I don't have the absolute solution. I would love some sort of, shall we say, spirit of generosity to spread across the cricket world so that everyone gets a bit of a chance, or everyone gets the chance they need. And if that were to happen, obviously it would mean not just India, but England, Australia, the countries with the relatively full coffers, to acknowledge that some of that needs to be spread, and for ICC to also take that on board, I would suggest.
Yeah, I completely agree. Something I said a few weeks ago about the ICC is I don't know whether they're impotent, is maybe one word, or whether they're just not willing to stir the pot too much. Because they're the ones that supposedly got the power, but they don't seem to be wanting to. They seem to be reducing World Cups rather than increasing the size of them and the reach of them. But I've got a bit of a question that I wanted to ask you. Is how do you think you'd have fitted into this England side? I see a slot for you in at 5, Bairstow moving down and keeping. Unfortunately, Folkes doesn't get in. I think you'd have fit in there nicely, a sort of dashing, swashbuckling. There's been a lot of words used to describe you as a player. All of them very positive, normally. But where do you think you'd have fit? Can you see yourself in there, slotting in at number 5?
Oh, one would like to think so, obviously. Yeah, the nice thing about being long retired, one of the few nice things about being long retired, is that some of those old memories of the failures or have sort of slipped away, sort of the frustrations, which, I mean, I'm fully aware, I haven't forgotten, so the number of people who are frustrated by the bad days but love the good days. Yeah, I suppose if you were transposed into the modern, if I was suddenly 25 years old again, for the sake of argument, you could imagine he would have been brought up differently over the last 10, 15 years, different sort of system, different sort of environment. And I always, whenever you do this sort of transgenerational transposition, you have to say to yourself, right, let's put it into the right sort of context. What would you have done at school? What would you have done, in the sort of the time from going to school to county club? You're playing white ball cricket. We used to, what was the shortest game we played in the 70s, 80s? 40 overs. So, the Sunday league, that was, 40, is that all? 40 overs. And yet nowadays, of course, that's, you're playing two T20 matches. You learn new tricks. I mean, I didn't like wearing visors, and I hated the sort of the claustrophobia of having something in front of my eyes here. So I only ever wore that silly little helmet with those silly little side pieces and a little bit of sponge over your temples, which, let's face it, probably wasn't adequate to the task, but I never really got tested. So if you're going to play silly shots over your head, well, you probably have to wear something a bit different on your head. I don't know. I'd like to think those skills would have transferred and would have been up to the task. And the other question that sometimes gets asked is, how would you have fared in, say, would you have made it into the IPL? I always, because I was so very much of the mindset, Test cricket comes first. Even ODIs, my ODI career, I have to be honest about it, started relatively well and sort of kind of tailed away over the years as sort of the incentive to think it counted. Just somehow psychologically in the background, it was, it's just a bit of fun, But if you are suddenly offered the chance to make a small fortune, wherever it might be, even the most romantic, moral, I love the game and that's surely good enough type person would go, $500,000 wouldn't go amiss,
Absolutely not.
I might, hang on. Let me just go back into that net and try and learn how to ramp it. I'll just.
I've got to put a helmet on. Pass me one of them visors.
Let's worry about the helmet. No, I'll just get it. It would. I'm sure it would change one's mindset. But getting into. But let's face it. If I were good enough to get into this current test team, then I think the one thing I can say is I would love. I'd fully love the culture, the atmosphere. McCullum as your coach, Stokes as your captain, and luckily, actually, now here's my question back to you: would both of them fit into this team? Because let's put it this way. The culture they have at the moment, the one thing missing as far as Ian would be concerned is the amount of fine red wine or Chardonnay or both at the end of the day. It's a different sort of thing. So I'd probably be not only designated to have, try and show a bit of flair at number 4 or 5, but also designated to keep the great man company.
I'd love to see. I would love to see that in a dressing room. This thing, I think, certain ways that I think cricket is obviously apparently people got better, bigger, faster, stronger. But that some of the personalities that were from sort of your era, where you were allowed to see that, and that was one of the things I took almost from when you talked about that 15 minutes that you had at the end of your Sky career. BP sat there in what he was wearing. You sat there in what you were wearing. For me, just summed up your two sort of personalities and how you were perceived by the public. One person sort of quite very proper and well-spoken in how they did things, and then another person sort of very brash. And I miss that about something. You've got people like Mark Wood to a certain extent that come in and I like that. But I'd have both of you in just solely on the entertainment value that the other stuff would provide. Because I love that about sports people. I like the sort of maverick personality.
Yeah, I mean, I
and
think
that ability to have a good time and show that there is more to life. This isn't the be all and end all. There is more to life. There is having a drink with your mates, and there is enjoying what life's providing for you.
Yeah, but again, I think it's a nice. One of the great things about this Stokes-McCullum era is that everyone is obviously enjoying themselves, and I've always preached to. I mean, let's get away from having to drink with beefy, or let's get away from, should we say, the idea that enjoying yourself involves a couple of bottles of red wine at the end of the day. It's enjoying the whole thing. Getting up in the morning, playing the game, whatever sociability you could manage at the end of it all is up to you. But it's enjoying the whole thing from the start of the day to the end of the day, because if you don't enjoy it, I mean, it's a hell of a shame. And again, whenever one sort of speaks to, you can say, should we say the Lord Stabben's hat again? You're speaking to some of these kids that have come through our programs, from wickets and are starting to play matches for the Tabs. And what they're doing is something very, very special, because in some cases, as we know, John, we know the story, they've come from a background that wouldn't necessarily have predicted that. They've learnt the skills of cricket. They've got very good at it. They're playing with, our Tabs teams. You know how mixed they can be. But there's some good cricket players. And they're doing it with a smile on their faces. And that, to me, is the most priceless thing about this whole thing. I mean, when I played cricket as a kid, my father sort of started me off at some single-figure age, way, way, way back. And then you get to school, and it's fun. And obviously, the better you are, the more fun it is. And then the more fun it is, the better you get. And the better you get, it's a lovely upward spiral. I always use that sort of analysis. And if you can keep that sense of fun, then it actually makes getting out of bed, whether it be for a county match or a test match, all the more easier. And yes, you'll have bad days. I had some terrible times. You have some really dark times, which we don't need to go into now. But you have those days, which is very much at the other end of the scale. And again, people will tell you from your first day you walk into a pro dressing room, there'll be bad days, there'll be good days. There'll probably be more bad days than good. So you treasure the good. And one of the key things is to sort of keep a smile on your face and to look forward to it with some sort of anticipation of joy.
Agreed.
Final one, David. Dare we dream of a series victory in India? Or is it, I mean, obviously the second test starts tomorrow morning. What are your thoughts?
You can always dream. And Stokes-McCullum and the rest of that squad will dream. And they're in a very good position. I mean, everything they did in that first test match, well, not everything, because obviously it started, as we know, it started on an oh, here we go, oh no, India, oh no, oh dear. And then it changed so dramatically. I mean, the interesting thing is that India now have problems with their own fitness. Kohli missing one more test match. It'll be interesting to see what happens when he comes back. And they have this pressure of having suddenly got it wrong. Now, I mean, I'd be fascinated to see how they pick their teams from now on in, what they do with their pitches from now on in, and how it goes. There's still a chance, obviously, that India at home, where they've been so incredibly strong for years now, will find a way to turn that balance, to tilt the pendulum back towards their success. That wouldn't surprise anyone. But the chance is there. And as we well know from seeing everything that Stokes-McCullum do, they will approach this next test match with eager anticipation, which is absolutely right. We've got Anderson back in, Bashir making his debut. It's just an extraordinary thing to watch. Let's dream. Let's keep fingers crossed. And as one who proudly can say that some years ago I came back, I was holding a trophy aloft in Kanpur at the end of a 2-1 victory in India. Again, not necessarily expecting to have that at the end of that tour, 84-85. Just go for it. Go for it. See what happens.
Brilliant. Well, look, Lord Gower, El Prez, as those of us who are taverners refer to you. It's been an absolute honour. Thank you so much for joining the two of us. Yeah, this last 55 minutes have been an absolute joy. So we can't thank you enough.
No, absolute pleasure. Absolutely a pleasure. And good luck. We'll see you somewhere in the next few months for sure.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well,
David.
Thanks.
my pleasure.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you soon. Okay. Bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
1 in 4 car batteries is weak and needs to be replaced. Let our professional parts people test your battery for free at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly.